Okay, so let's talk about the charges against former officer Garrett Rolfe and what's going on in Atlanta tonight with civil rights attorney and Atlanta radio show host Robert Patillo, the mayor of Inglewood, California, former police chief James Butts, and Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell. Welcome to all of you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Good to be here.
Okay, so we have the charges today. Politico says this: it convicted of felony murder. It's one of the 11 charges. Rolfe could face a life sentence without parole or the death penalty. Now, here's what our Fox News contributor colleague, former police officer himself, police detective, and lawyer now, Ted Williams, said about these charges today as they were announced.
We are not watching justice take place here. I don't give a damn about this white-black situation. These are human beings. This is a rush to judgment. This is to satisfy a crowd. And prosecution should never be based on satisfying a crowd. And that is what we have here. This is wholly unfair.
Mayor, I mean, you've served as a police chief. These are very difficult decisions. What do you make of this charge and all of these charges today?
Well, we just have to back up just a little bit. First of all, let's look at what happened here. We have a young man that was detained in a Wendy's parking lot for 40 minutes. He'd been arrested before. Saw an interview of him. He was a guy really traumatized by his time being incarcerated. They called a DUI expert over to interview him. When that happened, the die was cast. That officer was there just to make sure he got another DUI stat. They weren't human. Most cops would have just said, hey, park your car, walk home. But they arrested him. They didn't realize the kind of individuals they were dealing with, someone that was very traumatized, scared, didn't want to go back to jail. The fight started. Once the fight started, adrenaline takes over. He secures a taser. He runs. He looks like he fires the taser at the officer. At that point, the officer isn't concerned about how many feet they are apart, how many rounds have been fired from the taser, and he fires back. Now, that being said, he needs to go before justice. But here's what should not happen. You should not have a district attorney who's in a runoff at a time like this when the world is inflamed about the racist things that happened to George Floyd, and to say that he would be charged with aggravated assault because one of his errant rounds struck another vehicle shows you the mindset of the prosecutor. I'm very, very concerned about elected people making prosecutorial decisions now.
Well, and when it comes to the taser, there's been conversation about whether this officer felt that he was under a significant threat, a threat that was okay for lethal force. This is what the Fulton County District Attorney, who rolled out these charges today, here's what he said just a few days ago about a taser when he was talking about a case and potential charges against police officers for them using the taser. Here's what he said.
As many of you all know, under Georgia law, a taser is considered as a deadly weapon under Georgia law.
Okay, so Robert, how does that now square up with what the district attorney said today?
Well, it squares completely. And look, I've practiced law in the Fulton County Courthouse for the last 12 years. I can literally look out the window in front of me and see the Fulton County Courthouse. I've tried many cases against Paul Howard. Paul Howard has always taken the side of law enforcement and police officers. He is in his 7th term as district attorney with broad-based law enforcement support of him throughout his time in office. As a matter of fact, the criminal defense bar has criticized him for his allegiance to law enforcement. And let's understand the difference in this case between the one from 2 weeks ago, the 2 students from Morehouse and Spelman, is that the police officers in this case searched Mr. Brooks. They knew he did not have a weapon. That the police officers knew that the taser had been expelled 2 times and that it was empty at this point, that there was no threat of deadly force against them, and they still chose to shoot 3 shots at him, 2 of which hit Mr. Brooks, 1 of which hit another vehicle. The reckless nature of that, to fire lethal rounds where there are other people who are uninvolved, where one hits another vehicle that is full of other individuals, is beyond the pale. That is why we have these charges in this case, and the idea that someone will try to defend that from a law enforcement perspective is ridiculous.
Okay, so here's what we know. Our research department says that the district attorney, Mr. Howard, says this is the 40th prosecution of police officers for misconduct in Fulton County, the 9th time they've prosecuted a homicide case against an officer. So far, 0 convictions. But Gianna, what do you make of this situation tonight? The charges, and now reports that a number of officers who think this is unjust, they can't do their jobs, and they're not showing up for work tonight.
You know what? I have a very different opinion than my two colleagues on this panel. After seeing the tape, and of course we have to let the investigation play out, but seeing an individual take a taser, run, that's one situation. But when you point it back at the officer and potentially strike the officer, I would be of the mindset that deadly force in that case could be necessary. I do think, though, that the officers could have handled it a whole lot differently, especially considering the fact that our country is in an electrifying point. People are tense and people are really on edge. And I know that exists for citizens and officers as well. But at this particular time and in this particular case, this is certainly no George Floyd. And this is a situation where I don't think that the charges should have been as steep. Should he have been fired? Absolutely. But should he be facing potentially the death penalty? I don't think so.
Well, look, Shannon,
Well,
the
we'll see.
issue is
Okay, quickly.
just real quick. There's video, there's pictures they presented of the officer kicking the dead body of Rashard Brooks. There's no way you can say that this was somehow within the scope of law enforcement where you're kicking a dead body after you shoot him. That is why you have these charges.
Okay, let's, we're gonna leave it there. Okay,
Shannon.
yeah, quickly, yes.
Real
Yes, ma'am.
quick.
Kicking the dead
First of
body.
all, a taser is considered a deadly weapon. Over 1,000 people have died after the implementation of a taser since 2004. That's a study by Reuters. Secondly, the officer should have handled this differently. I believe that. But whether this rises to the level of a prosecution for murder, then they should have filed their charges. They should have given the officer due process. But this does seem to be a rush to judgment, and the aggravated assault charge is ridiculous.
All right, we're going to leave it there. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, still doing its own investigation, says it had no word today that these charges were going to come down without them finishing their part of the investigation. So we will see. I think everybody who's watched the tape agrees. It is heartbreaking and it is difficult to watch, as so many things are these days that are filling up our TV screens. Thank you all for being with us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Shannon.
Brothers and sisters, stay prayerful and keep your lamps filled with light.